everyone. Buenas tardes. ¿Cómo están? Well, I'm so happy that you all are here today. And this is the inaugural workshop for UCI Engage. And I want to thank Judy for her leadership on this, especially Shifta, who's really is phenomenal. Pretty much the person that can do everything, including the technology this morning. But what I'm going to do right now is just pretty much give you an overview of what community engaged teaching is before I introduce our illustrious leader who will lead the workshop. So again, thank you for being here. So the objectives of this workshop are really to introduce community engaged teaching models and best practices. We intend to provide resources and tools for the development of a community engaged course for UCI undergraduates and really explain the UCI requirements for the Servant Learning course designation. And really to assist you, faculty and staff and students. By a show of hands, how many here are faculty? How many are staff? And how many are graduate students? So we have this great mix. How can we got to get involved with more graduate students involved. So assist faculty with planning, outlining syllabus for a community engaged course. So what is community engaged learning? One can see it as an engagement with a community that addresses societal needs that are not currently being met by governments, markets, or the independent sector. It's an intentional integration of learning objectives and experience with or in the community, again, to have this reciprocal relationship. And it prepares students for ongoing reflection and critical analysis. It's a reciprocal benefits for students, community, and campus partners, and it really provides opportunities to critically examine public issues or explore one's civic identity. Keep in mind, we're going to have this PowerPoint on the UCI webpage. So community engaged learning as a teaching method is a pedagogy that embraces experiential and reflective education. And in so doing, it intentionally interrogates academic learning and relevant community service. And what's key here is that it's a reciprocal collaboration between campus and community partners. So we don't go in as instructors, we don't go into the community and say, well, I'm teaching this course of 150 students, here's what I'm doing, and here's what I want them to do here. It's a need identified by a community partner. It enhances learning, and the attempt is to never compromise academic rigor. We've heard a lot of people say that this kind of work really diminishes the academic rigor that the students learn, but it is not. And it includes a structured time for critical reflection. So there's different types of models of community engaged learning models. There's discipline-based, there's problem-based learning, capstone courses that maybe you have to take at the junior or senior year, action research models where the intention is actually to go out and do active kind of working with communities for change, social justice, for instance. And there's directed study where students would get additional credit. Because of the time constraints, I'm not going to go through each of these models, but know that's going to be on the webpage. So community engaged learning as an educational tool. There's benefits for the students, there's benefits for the faculty, and there's benefits for the community. So students gain a deeper understanding of subject matter as well as complex social issues, and it increases their ability to solve problems creatively. For faculty, there's an increased ability to demonstrate real-world application of student learning. And it's an extension of the classroom into the community for the development, again, of mutually beneficial knowledge. And for the community, it enhances their organizational capacity to achieve its mission, and most importantly, it creates new alliances and partnerships with the university. So before I introduce Connie McGuire again, I want to take the time to thank Judy, thank Chief and the rest of the UCI Engage team in creating this great opportunity to bring this to the UCI community and really try to create a culture of community engaged teaching and research. the bio. Let's see if I have Connie's bio. So Connie McGuire, Dr. Connie McGuire, is currently a specialist with UCI's Community Resilience Projects and Department of Family Medicine, where she worked on community engagement projects in a variety of settings, from sustainability, education evaluation, to quality of care improvement programs for patients with Alzheimer's disease and their caregivers. She is a cultural anthropologist by training, is currently the PI of an engaged research project examining the emergence of healing practices in the context of movements for political and social change. She is trained in several mindfulness-based practices, including Hakomi, a somatic psychotherapy method, and as a yoga instructor. So please help me welcome Dr. McGuire, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for that kind introduction, Gil, and thank you for inviting me to give this workshop. I'm super excited to be here. Thanks to Shavita and Judy, and also to Andrea, who I think she may be out sick, but she was also super helpful in helping this happen. So this is just more info about, here, I think I need to skip back down to my part here. Here we go. More about my bio. The only thing that I would add is just this part, number 2 and number 3 of the bullet points, is just that my most recent past position was working as a postdoctoral scholar in the Community Knowledge Project, which some of you may have heard of previously. And I was with that project for 5 years, doing community engaged research throughout Orange County. We're working with a lot of nonprofits and a lot of residents, and in particular, working on restorative justice activities in the schools and the neighborhoods, and working as an evaluation specialist. And it's through that sort of lab setting that I really learned a lot about both doing community engagement and teaching about community engagement. And it was at that time that I first worked with the community engagement minor. And I first entered there working as a mentor to students who were taking the community engaged methods class. And then the subsequent year, I taught the class. So I was the instructor, and then I'll be teaching that class again this coming year. So this actually, doing this workshop has been really helpful because I'm prepping my syllabus for next quarter. So it's been great to think through some of these questions again before the quarter starts. And then I also have a real interest in mindfulness, and you'll learn about that in our session today. How many people here have done work in community engagement or presently or in the past? Okay, so about half the group, cool. So the objectives for this session are to learn about the principal elements of the course that I taught. So we're gonna get really micro on thinking about my course, about the course that's coming out of the UCI engagement minor. And then also engage in an experiential activity. It's a listening exercise that could be used with your students to support your community engagement activities with them. And then we'll have a few worksheets that we'll work through in small groups where you can start to think about creating a syllabus for working with students to develop community engagement opportunities in your specific courses. And then also to think about mentors. Like I was saying, I was previously a mentor. So you'll have an opportunity to just start to brainstorm ideas for who might be mentors for students in the classes that you teach. And then the final two are process objectives. So you'll get to collaborate with each other. Hopefully we're gonna try to mix you up with people from different parts of campus. And then we'll connect, you'll be able to connect with other emerging community engaged scholars or instructors. So I wanted to note that this workshop is focused on this course, and it's specifically like the classroom teaching model. But like I said, as a postdoc, I really learned a lot about community engaged teaching in that lab setting, and that involved me acting as a mentor, as a mentee, and then also as a mentor to graduate students and to undergraduate students. So for those of you who aren't specifically teaching courses, so a lot of this stuff is relevant for that. So just sort of try to think about translating that as we go through. And then again, of course, you can ask me any questions. So these are the principal elements that I sort of drew out from my syllabus that I used as kind of the fundamental aspects that we wove through the different weeks of the course. So collaboration across difference. Basically when we're bringing students to work in the community, they may be entering a community setting that they are already a part of, that they identify with, right? Communities can be overlapping. But often we're working across certain kinds of differences, whether they be student or a non-student, or they could be, around race, gender, class type of differences, educational status, et cetera. And so in the class, at least in the community engagement minor, we have students from all over campus who are part of that minor, so the class tends to be very diverse. So really encouraging folks to work in their small groups with people that they don't necessarily know, and with people who, have a person who's a social science major, like a sociology major, working with an engineering student in their small group. So they're really getting that experience of working with people who come from really different backgrounds. In particular, because it's a methods course, there's an attention to ethics and power in the relationship between the university and the community, and going over the history of abuses by researchers in the past, so that students have a sense of that history and the kind of sensitivities and lessons to be learned from that. And then also kind of on a more micro level, which relates to the active listening, is just thinking about interpersonal communication style and power dynamics there as well. And then ongoing reflection, which echoes some of the stuff that Gil was talking about. So throughout the course, every week the students have journaling and reflection activities. Sometimes they're incorporated also into the course time. And that is a way for me also to be tracking what's going on and what they're learning, and to really have them be making connections between what's happening in the classroom and what's happening with the place where they're doing their community engaged research project. And then the active listening skills, which we will get into together in this session. So basically, listening is critical to community engaged research, because listening is critical to developing relationships. And community engaged research is all about developing relationships between university communities and communities outside of the university. And again, communities can be overlapping, right? And so we really want to, or I value teaching and bringing attention to listening skills as a way to, as a sort of fundamental practice that students can work on while they're in the class to take into these new settings where they're developing new relationships. And then defining community engaged. In this class, it's community engaged research. In your classes, it would be defining what that means in the case of your specific topic area or course topic, right? And so, in my case, basically making a really clear description of what community engaged research methods are compared to other research methods. And so in this case, as Gil was also discussing, it's really foregrounding sort of where the problem comes from. The problem doesn't necessarily come from the literature review that the student does and then develops questions from. The problem and the research problem and the research questions come from a community process that the researchers engage in, right? So we're just learning about those two differences so that they can be clear about how is community engaged research any different than any other kind of research. And then lastly, I used a community engaged mentor model, which I inherited from the person who taught the course before me, and it worked really well at first. I was a mentor the first time I was involved in the course. And this model, we'll learn more about this, but basically it links up in small groups students from the course with different mentors around campus who are doing community, usually who have an already existing community engaged research project, who either have a need for students to help them out with some stuff or who are willing to take folks on. And I did seek funding to support that work and was able to get stipends for the mentors. And this is another spot where it can be instructors, faculty members, but also can be staff. So like, I don't know, in the RSVP list, there was someone from the library, but the library, folks from the library do really interesting community archive projects and stuff like that. So there can be lots of different folks who could be potential mentors and they might not be on your radar. So just thinking kind of broadly about who might be doing research projects and who could mentor your students, as well as graduate students, right? So graduate students who are working with a faculty member who does a community engaged research project are fabulous. They usually are the ones who are really out in the field the most because they have more time, and then maybe it's their dissertation project. They might be going to their site multiple times a week, and they are usually really interested and have a really great dynamic with the students. So encourage that as well. So that's kind of an overview, and now just diving in a little bit to the idea of listening practice. So. The concept active listening was coined by Rogers and Farson in 1957. And the sort of three components of active listening, which you may have heard of, is the idea that you listen for meaning, not just for content, when engaging with someone. You respond to emotion or the feeling that's coming from the words, not just the literal words. And then you also pay attention to nonverbal cues. So that's both the nonverbal cues of the speaker and the nonverbal cues of the listener. So active listening, started in 1957 and got really popularized in the 80s, and now has been used in all different kinds of disciplines, like obviously communication studies and linguistics, but also in business and engineering and psychology, of course. So why listening practice in community engagement? So the essential point here is just that listening is a key component of relationship building, and community engagement is basically building a relationship between the university community and other communities. And the way we listen communicates something to the listener about our relationship. And the other point that I wanted to make is sort of distinguishing the idea of listening as a skill and thinking about it more as a practice. So like the same way we as instructors or people who are working with students think about things like reading and writing, right? So it's not that you're just going to teach someone how to write and they're going to be done for the rest of their life. Oh, they know how to write. No, it's, we continue to learn how to write throughout our lives, and we get better at it, hopefully. We learn new things. We learn new ways of working with text. We might learn new platforms. So in the same way, listening is a practice that we can cultivate, and we can continue to reflect about what kind of a listener we are, and things that we can do that help ourselves to listen and communicate more effectively with people, and to basically create the kinds of relationships that we're hoping to have with them. And in this case, the idea of active listening came from psychology, and sort of thinking about developing the therapeutic relationship. Here we're thinking about developing, maybe you could call it the research relationship or a learning relationship. There might be different ways you might think about what's happening with the listening in your context. So I found this really interesting research. I'm really interested in mindfulness, about using mindfulness techniques to teach awareness of listening behaviors. So it's sort of a question, like, can we teach people how to listen better, and how do we do that? And this scholar did a study. This is out of social work, and so they're trying to teach students how to build the therapeutic relationship, and then how to pay attention to the way that they're listening, and track that. And so she used mindfulness as a way to help people do that reflection. And through that work, she found that the key barriers to listening that students brought up were the mind wandering, multitasking, and thinking ahead, right? So while listening to people, so mind wandering being that you're listening to someone and engaging with them, and maybe something they say makes you think about something else, and then suddenly you're off thinking about that other thing, and you're no longer catching what they're saying. Or most importantly, your body language might change because you're not paying attention anymore, right? And so then you're also changing the relationship with the person. So multitasking, this article was talking about cell phones and technology and that kind of thing. So obviously we can all relate to that. Your phone pings and you are distracted and feel like you need to go answer it or whatever. And then thinking ahead is a really common one, which is especially common among academics, right? So you're listening and you're engaged and you're trying to think, wow, that was a really cool idea, and how am I going to build on that, and what am I going to say next, or that kind of thinking ahead. So basically, she had this idea of she used mindfulness to basically do a study where these were the results of there were like, 15 or 16 different barriers that she came up with. These were the top 3. So practicing mindfulness can bring awareness of this in the same way that we're going to experience right now, in the same way that when you're in a state of mindfulness and your mind begins to wander from the thing that you're focusing on, you can bring your mind back to that thing. Okay. So we're going to do an active listening practice. I forgot to mention at the beginning that everybody should be prepared to stand up and move around in here. I'm hoping that for this, we're going to do a few different activities. And for this activity, I'm hoping that you can find someone who you don't know and who's not in your school or in your department at least. So before we start, let me just give the instructions. Please bring something to write on, so whether it's your computer or a piece of pen and paper. Then find a partner, preferably someone you don't know who's not in your department. And then position your chair so you're facing one another comfortably. Then decide who's going to be person A and who's going to be person B, and you'll switch roles. And then I'm going to give you guys some prompts. So you can feel free to spread around in the classroom, and we'll move again in a few minutes. So take a few minutes to find someone you don't know. Okay. So get yourself seated comfortably. Your writing material stuff you can put to the side for a moment. You don't need the writing materials. You don't need anything in your hands. So you don't need anything in your hands. If you have anything in your hands, maybe put it down. Because we're going to do a 2-minute mindfulness activity, and then we're going to do a 2-minute listening activity. Then we'll do 1 minute of writing a reflection, and then we'll switch roles. Okay? So just to prepare for the mindfulness activity, just make sure you're in a comfortable place, that you can sit comfortably in your chair, that you don't have anything in your hands or nothing's going to fall if you stop paying attention. And then, so we'll just start to come into mindfulness. So you can go ahead and just take your gaze downward. If you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. If you're not, just take your gaze downwards, like towards the table or the floor in front of you. And then I just encourage you to feel your sit bones or the tailbone grounding into the chair. Maybe you just lean back into the back of the chair, noticing the back side of your body and the way it's connected to the chair and the way the chair is connected to your back. And then notice your feet and the way they're resting on the floor, your legs on the chair. Just relax your shoulders, allow your arms to either relax by your side or maybe in your lap. And then bring your awareness to your breath. So first just noticing the inhale and the exhale. Notice the quality of your breath. Does it feel shallow or deep? Does it feel fast or slow? Just noticing the experience of breathing in and out. And so for a moment here, we'll just take this time to focus on the breath. So just focus with each inhale on the inhale, and with each exhale on the exhale. You may notice that your breath begins to deepen when you focus on it like this, or it may stay the same. And after a few moments, your mind may wander. And I just encourage you, as soon as you notice it wandering, just to come back to your breath. On the inhale and the exhale. On the inhale and the exhale. And gradually coming back to the room. If your eyes are closed, you can just gently open them and start just looking down at first. And maybe wiggling your fingers, maybe wiggling your toes, just shifting back and forth in your seat. And then just finding your space in front of your partner. And if you haven't already, affirm who's going to be person A and who's going to be person B. So in the exercise, that will be another 2 minutes long. For the first we'll do it, we're going to switch and do the mindfulness again as well. Sorry, let me get my timer here. So you will... Person A is not going to talk. Person A is the listener. So you're going to do active listening, but with no talking. So just using your body to try to actively listen to the person. And then the person who's talking will have about 2 minutes to talk. And I want you to talk about, uninterrupted, about why community engagement matters to your work or why you came to this workshop. So just talking about community engagement to your partner who won't talk. Yes?
The partner not talking is able to take notes, or is not?
No notes, just sitting there, just listening. Yeah, just listening actively without talking. Okay? All right, so go ahead. So wrapping that up now. And so now everybody, wrapping that up. So wrapping up the conversation here. Everybody now, go ahead and get your thing that you have to write with, and we'll just take 1 minute just to quickly jot down your reflections. So for the person who was being listened to, what made you feel, what things about the interaction made you feel like you were being heard, that you were being listened to? And then for the listener, what was challenging about listening? What helped you pay attention? And what was it like to do the mindfulness practice before the listening? Actually, I have these up. Yeah, I put them up here, sorry. So as the person being listened to, what made you feel you were being heard? And as the listener, what was challenging about listening? What helped you pay attention? You don't have to answer all the questions. I just want you to jot down some thoughts because we're going to go into small groups and debrief after. So just take a minute to do that. Okay. So moving on to switching partners, but first we'll come back into mindfulness. So again, put your everything away, just let go of your pen and your notebook or your computer. And we'll go ahead and come into mindfulness again. So you might notice that since we did this just a few moments ago, that you already feel a little bit more relaxed. But go ahead and bring your gaze down if that feels comfortable. Maybe gazing down at the table or the floor, something kind of neutral. You can just soften the focus. Or if you feel comfortable, you could close your eyes. And then again, coming to the body, noticing the feet resting on the floor beneath you. Notice the chair, the sensation of the chair supporting your body. Maybe allow yourself to relax a little bit more back into the chair, releasing your tailbone into the seat and your backbone into the back of the chair. Noticing the support there. Maybe relax your jaw a little bit. And then start to bring your attention to your breath. Again, noticing the inhalation and the exhalation. Bringing your attention to the breath. You could repeat to yourself, inhale on the inhale and exhale on the exhale. Just staying with that focus. The breath in and out. And then coming out of your mindfulness practice, just gently opening the eyes, maybe wiggling the fingers and the toes, bringing some movement into the body. And then preparing for your conversation, your listening practice with your partner. So this time person B will be the listener, and person A will not talk, and you'll just listen to your partner. And you'll talk for 2 minutes uninterrupted about why community engagement matters for your work or why you came to this workshop, what the theme means to you. So go ahead and start. And we'll move into the written reflection exercise. So go ahead and grab your pen and paper. So go ahead and grab your pen and paper now. We'll grab your pen and paper and just switching your reflection. So as the person who is being listened to, what made you feel like you were being heard? And then as the listener, what was challenging about listening? What helped you pay attention? And what was it like to do the listening, having just done the mindfulness practice? So just take a couple minutes to take some quick notes, and then we're going to get into small groups and debrief. Okay, so just finish up your notes there. And then now we will move into small groups to debrief. So once you're in your small group, pick someone who can be a scribe. So we're gonna debrief and just talk about these questions in the small group. So someone who can be a scribe for you, preferably someone who could give me the notes at the end. That would be awesome. So someone who has a piece of paper that they could hand up. Otherwise, if you put it on a computer, that's okay. Whatever works. The second thing, is everybody introduce yourselves in the group and then begin to talk about the questions as a whole group. Okay, so first introduce yourself, say your name and where you came from, yeah.
And so what's the scribe supposed to be taking notes about?
The scribe is taking notes about your conversation in response to these prompts, yeah.
And can we share them digitally, or do you need to see them, right?
No, you can share them digitally, yeah. Yeah, okay. Okay, so let's wrap that up. You might not be completely done with your conversation, but this is just an exercise to show you how it works. So thank you for participating. And so we're not going to see this exercise to its end. I'm just going to point you in the direction of where we would go. Some of you may be itching to share something with the whole group. So if you want to, if any of the groups, if there's anybody who wants to first just share what sort of came out in your group. Not every group necessarily is going to get to go because we don't have time, but anybody who has like an itching thing that they want to say about what it was like being listened to and what made you feel you were being heard of the folks in your group. Any thoughts on that? Anything you want to share from your conversation?
So there was a lot of agreement that eye contact was really important, an appearance that the listener was being engaged and paying attention to what was being said. That was important. And not, having the eyes dart off, being
Great.
distracted by other sorts of things. So
Great, so eye contact, really important. Okay. Anyone else have anything to share about what was important about, or what was striking about that?
Well, the
part?
best way I think any of us said it was the whole head matters because because it was the eye contact, but also just the facial expressions that show was there a moment of confusion, a moment where I wanted you to clarify, a moment of like surprise or wowness or all those things kind of came, and then also just the posture about like leaning forward. If there was sort of background noise was creeping in, I felt like we kind of would lean forward with each other to invite more time.
Great. Okay. So the whole head. So all those muscles in your head. We have so many neurons here now. Like these things that we can feel to use to express things. Right. So all of that is really important in receiving that, what to feel heard. Right. So we're really focusing on what it feels like to be listened, and those are some of the cues that you're being listened to. Great. And then how about as listeners? Anything challenging that's coming up to the surface for your group, or anybody want to share something?
We didn't talk as a group, but I just wanted to say, I think we both of us shared this in common, that we were itching to ask some questions. We were dying to know more about something that you were trying to hold your tongue.
Okay, yeah, so having to just keep it to yourself, and the part about listening in silence, not being able to say anything. Okay, great. How about what helped you pay attention? Any thoughts on that? Anything you all were just no problems paying attention? It was interesting. The topic helped you pay attention. Yeah. Okay. Great.
And I think the mindfulness did help in that having done mindfulness before, but also having done lots and lots of interviews, is having centered to a certain place that whatever other anxiety or whatever things that are going around, deliberately center yourself. I mean, especially with breathing, if you're telling yourself you're breathing, you can't really think about other things. And that was, it was helpful this time, but I always find it helpful. I don't do it exactly like that.
Yeah.
But you have to, especially, these were easy things to talk about, but you could be in the community asking about someone's heroin addiction.
Right.
And you need to be centered before you do that.
Yes. Great. Okay. So you're connecting it to what the mindfulness piece helped you to stay focused on what the person was saying. In this case, maybe it was not a hard topic to stay focused on, but sort of to maybe be in your center on your response to them if it were, say, a topic that maybe was hard to hear about. Great. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
And it was already set up so that our space, the physical space, was clear of distraction. Put away your writing stuff, put away your computer. So that part was already done. So you didn't have to make that effort. And the noise, it was a little bit loud, so I immediately leaned in so I could hear better.
Great. Great. Okay, so this is all fabulous, and this is exactly the kind of thing that we would be talking about in class. And then the next thing that would happen is we would have a focused conversation about nonverbal communication, right? So this is really focused on we think about communication as talking, right, and language. And so then what are the, written language or verbal language, but what are the ways and we would sort of break it down and put it all on the board and talk about that as a sort of way of bringing awareness to that part of listening skills, okay? And then apply it to maybe something that they can take to their interactions in the community, and then there'll be journal reflections that they're gonna do where they can reflect about this practice that they're taking to the community. So that's a little tidbit of that. Does anybody have anything else itching they want to share before we move to the next part? Okay, so I want to give you all a chance to do some worksheets where you're going to work on developing community engagement opportunities in the courses that you teach. So we're going to identify communities relevant to your topic area, identify ways that you engage or could engage with those communities. Yeah, go ahead and get back to your comfortable spot, sorry. Let me let you have that transition. So actually, this is the time, if there are folks here who are in your school or your unit or who might have some of the same mentor networks or the same networks for community engagement opportunities as you, if you have figured that out at all, it might be good to sit near them because we're going to do these worksheets, but you can sort of talk with your peers during it. So if that is appropriate, go ahead and sit near some folks who may be in your school or your unit. So again, I'll start that again. So identify the communities relevant to your topic area, identify ways that you engage or could engage with those communities, and then develop topic areas and activities that you could use to incorporate community engagement activities for your students and communities. So we have a worksheet, which I think should be to just hand it out. Let me just get my copy. Yes, okay. So you should have a worksheet. So basically, you can work through this individually or with people next to you chatting about it. And what we're trying to do is just the front side is really some thinking through, especially for those of you who haven't really had time or opportunity to think about this. So we're really trying to think about defining community engagement in your topic area, right? So I was saying that for me, I'm teaching a methods class, so it's pretty specific. I'm thinking about how do we actually, what are the how-tos of engaging with communities to do research with communities. For you, it might be something really different, like you might be in biological sciences working on water, and you're trying to figure out, well, I don't even know, my thing is really specific, this, scientific, biological science thing that I'm working on, and it's not the people you don't think of that are in the community aren't the ones that come to mind. So just taking some time to really think about what are the connections between either the topic of your course or your research area and the potential communities. So first taking it from your own perspective, and then on the other side of the sheet we'll work into specifically course development. So thinking about a course title and course objectives, and then going forward to think about topics and activities. So back to page 1. So the first prompt is what community or communities are relevant to the topic of the courses that you teach. So consider the people impacted by the problems you examine, the application of the theories you develop, the impact of the kinds of discoveries you make, or the people who have firsthand experience with the information, firsthand experience or information about the problems you're trying to understand. So list those communities on the left side. So for example, in that water example, it might be someone could start to think about a local watershed. They might be able to think about, a place where their water knowledge is relevant to that place, right? And maybe there's some contamination issue. And so in the local watershed, who are the communities, right? And usually for most questions or most topics, there'll be multiple communities that you could potentially think about working with. And then you may prioritize some over the other for reasons of logistics and feasibility, right? But to really just get those out there and start to think about them. So just for yourself and your own projects. Any questions? Does that make sense? Oops.
Connie, how much time?
Let's see, this total, we're going to try to take 15 minutes with this, 10 to 15 minutes. So it's just a brainstorming activity to get you guys starting to think about the communities that you're working with, or the communities that are relevant to your research. Okay, so let's come back. So again, sorry to interrupt your conversations. Hopefully we can create some kind of a list so we can be in communication with each other. If you all have made connections, or at least you can exchange cards and stuff, because a big part of doing this community engagement work is also around developing the networks within the university with folks who are also doing community engagement work, because it just really helps with getting to know people out there. And I also just wanted to make the point before we debrief on this, that the communities can also be communities within the university that have really close ties outside of the university. So for example, the year that I was a mentor for the methods class, we started a community engaged research project from scratch with first generation college students. So that was a really strong interest among the students I was working with. Another group worked with undocumented students who were connected to activist groups off campus. So and thinking about education and issues around being undocumented. So the communities are overlapping and they're not distinct from each other necessarily. So just encourage you to also think about, the community isn't just out there. Like, we are a community and we're also part of many communities that are both on the university and outside. So anyway, any just really quick reflections on this process of this worksheet and how it's making you think about the possibility of creating a course. Let's start with what maybe worked well about this. Anything that was helpful about this worksheet? Anybody make any progress? Yeah.
Well, it forced me to articulate clearly some of the stakeholders and possible ways people would be involved and benefit. But it also, well, start.
Yeah. Okay. Any other? We'll get to the limitations. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Any other things that worked well? So it was just an exercise. Really, that's really the main point of this. Really, is just to get concrete. Just put it on paper or put it on your computer screen. What is it that I could possibly do around community engagement in my area of expertise? First, in my area of expertise, really, maybe just me as a person. As a scholar, as a teacher. What could I do engagement work around? And then once you sort of have a sense of that and have articulated that, then moving to thinking about it in your teaching in particular, right? So sort of starting with the self, yeah.
So I was just going to mention that sometimes it might be hard to think of the right community, and so sort of a second level down could be engaging with local community schools, K to 12, or even community colleges about transmitting and getting people interested in the topics that you're engaged in.
Great.
So even if it's not, that your particular area has a community out there's another way to pass it on.
Yes, wonderful. Yeah, so finding like an institutional location, right, where there might be interest in your topic area through which you would make connections with certain community groups. A school itself could be considered a community, right, a community partner, of course. Yeah, great. Any other thoughts on this? Okay, what about the limitations of this, or what are you sort of like, what do I do? I don't know how to do this. Any limitations or uncertainties? Anybody wants to share? No? Yeah.
Well, the point I was going to make was that none of these stakeholders are here, and I have no idea how they would articulate their interest in this. In case of this particular topic, I imagine in many cases they'd be completely unaware of this issue. I have to sort of convince them that it's in their interest to engage in this issue.
Yes. Yes. And that also came up with a couple of other folks here. So I think there's a process that isn't included in this sheet, which is around finding out, you have ideas and areas and things that you know about, and then you have potential communities out there that you think would be good partners. And we don't want to assume that they would be, right? We want to ask those communities, are you interested in having a conversation with me about partnership or about whatever X topic? I don't know, what's your topic?
Legacies of racial violence.
Okay, are you interested in having a conversation about legacies of racial violence, right? Maybe the executive director of a nonprofit organization, or maybe there's a community group, that's doing organizing and, saying, can I have, would you be interested in me coming to your meeting, your regular monthly meeting for half an hour and just, we can talk about this, right? And then so there's this iterative process that is the connection between the front side and the back side of this, I think, is what you're pointing out, which is really wonderful. Yeah. And not it not coming from just your area of expertise, but the interest of the community and the needs. Yeah, great. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes, and I wanted to just explain the mentor model that I have used in the course, and I have a worksheet, but I think what we should do is just hand it out, and you guys can do it on your own after. I'll just hand it out at the end, because I want to give time for any wrap up or any last questions or anything that you all need to do before we finish. Thanks to all of you for your meaningful participation. I really appreciate your engagement. So this is sort of the third portion in terms of practice. So in the course, in the bubbles, so we're basically covering most of the bubbles, but in different ways. But this is the one about cultivating community engaged mentors. So this is what I did. This may be possible for you, or it's just one practice. So the first step was to secure funding through the community engagement minor director to support payment of some kind to the mentors for their time and participation in mentoring the students in the community engaged methods course. And this had already been done previous to the time I taught the class, so that made it really easy. And then I contacted potential mentors through my networks. So most of them were people that I already knew. There's at least one here. Yay, Mo. Mo is a mentor. Dr. Mo Sammy, who's in public health. And she did an awesome job mentoring students in the class, and they had so much fun working in Santa Ana. And then the mentors came to class and gave 5-minute presentations to the class about what their project was about. And so the students ranked the projects they wanted to work on, and I assigned them. So they were able to pick things they were interested in, which I had been told is very important especially for the community engagement minor, that the students want to feel like the projects that they're working on are really of relevance to them. And like that sort of, my experience as a mentor also reflected that when, the students really wanted to work on first generation college with that community, in part because they were either first generation themselves or they had people who they were very close with who were. So they were just kind of developmentally in a place where they really wanted to be connected to the research project. And so then students worked with mentors in 3 or more sessions on a community engaged research project. So usually the project was already an ongoing project. So for example, Mo had a project that was up and running. She already had other students who were going to work there on different aspects of a big. Do you want to just, can you give the 2-sentence version of what the project was?
It was a health equity active transportation project where we were trying to include skateboarders in the model of biking and walking. Why not rolling? So we were trying to make Santa Ana skate friendly by 2020. So it was in the beginning phases when we were doing capacity building with the youth for advocacy, needs assessments. So the 2 students that came on were coming at the right time. We were planning our first confidence skating classes in Santa Ana, and we were planning our first International Skate Day. So they got a lot of experience in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, it was fabulous. This was like the perfect mentor experience, and they loved it. And one of them wanted to stay on after. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah.
And we're still ongoing. So
yeah. Oh, great. Okay. Good. Perfect. Love to hear that. So yes, so they worked, so they had like a minimum, I think it was 3 sessions that they had to go to the mentor time with the mentor, and then they had to do reflection on it in their journaling. Some of them, like in this case, they did many more than 3 because they just got super involved in the project and wanted to stay on. So then the role of the instructor becomes, in part, a lot of coordination with the mentors, and there's coordinating, making sure the students know where the mentors are and know how to get transportation to where they're going, all this coordination role, and then also around the payment to the instructors, right? So it adds a different element to the instructor role that's different than just your typical classroom instruction. And then students did ongoing reflection about the intersection of their research project and the course material in weekly journals. And then at the end of the quarter, the students gave a final presentation about their community engaged research project, and the mentors were invited to come. So that's the model that I somewhat inherited and then changed a little bit. And so then I have the handout, but I'm just going to give it to you at the end because we run out of time. But it basically just helps you start to think through who are the people that even if you don't yourself have connections to the communities that you think are relevant to your work, who are the people that do, right? And then And then again, going through, so let's see, sorry. So it's who the people that you have connection to that are relevant for your course topic, and then list the people who you're actually working with. Maybe you do know people on community projects that are relevant to your topic. So both the people that you don't know, but you know people who know them, and then the people that you know. And then finally, there's a really important aspect, which again is not the traditional instructor role, is this issue of incentives. So what kind of incentives could you offer your mentors for working with your students during the term? So sometimes the student skill itself is an incentive enough, and like people just need bodies to come and do surveys, and that is an incentive. So it doesn't always have to be gift cards. Or in my case, it's research funds that go to the mentors. So you can also ask the department chair or dean, or are there small grants that could support this type of work, right? That come either within the university or externally. So you'll get to work through that. And I'm sorry we didn't have time to do it, but I think it was good to take a little bit more time with the other one. So just to end, recap of the objectives. So we learned about the principal elements of the course that I've been teaching, Community Engaged Research. We did an experiential active listening exercise and really learned about some of the things that can come up through that, and how mindfulness can be a tool for teaching active listening. We developed ideas for community engagement workshops in the courses community engagement opportunities in the courses that you teach, which is worksheet 1. And then you will identify potential mentors across campus when you do worksheet 2. So either in the Orange County community or sometimes beyond. So if the people aren't here in Orange County, sometimes there are ways of remotely being able to work with other communities, like halfway across the world. There are things that people need and ways to engage with them. So just keep that in mind, not to limit yourself only to Orange County if there's an aspect of your work that is elsewhere. And then you got to build community. So we collaborated with your co-participants from different parts of the campus, and you got to connect with community engaged scholars, emerging community engaged scholars and instructors. So that's all from me. I want to say thanks, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And I'm guessing, everything's going to go out in an email. So we'll have the PowerPoint, and I'm guessing there'll be an evaluation.
Yeah, we'll send an evaluation and
okay.
post all this information on the website. So if you want to share the PowerPoint or any of the handouts with your colleagues, they'll all be available there.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, we have one more workshop coming up next quarter.
Thank you so much, Connie. This was really great.